go. Back for a second time inside the Erie Insurance Arena, and this time it's playoff time, baby. Welcome in, everybody, to the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by our friends at Rebich Investments. They're taking over the sponsorships here at the Erie Insurance Arena. Rebich Investments, making financial guidance simple. For more info, head over to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or you can simply call their number during business hours, 814-734-3433. For the first time inside the arena, Nick Artman gets to join me here. You missed out on last one, but you get it when it matters, Nick, in playoff time.
Listen, I just was waiting for the right moment, right? You guys can handle the regular season. I'm going to come in. I will take care of playoffs. Don't worry. I'm here for you. You know, it's the sacrifice I make for the podcast.
Only the big fish when we get to this moment. So we appreciate Paul Adamczak on us here for the last episode. We're excited to be in here. Puck drop between the Otters and the Saginaw Spirit is at 7 o'clock tonight. So just at the top of the hour, we'll be here with you until about then. And if you are coming to the game, which you should buy your ticket now. It doesn't matter that it's a Tuesday. You should go anyway. You want to get here at puck drop because, as we're going to talk about during the next 45 minutes or so, this team, Nick, has been scoring goals and scoring goals at will. They come into tonight's game with a 2-0 series lead. And more importantly, they've scored 17 goals in those two games, including 8 goals in the second period of game one. This offense has been lights out. And not to mention, they're missing arguably their two best offensive players, Matthew Schaefer and Kerry Terrain.
Yeah, I said to Sean Bednar before the game, I said, you got to reach into that bag of tricks because there are so many goals being scored. Sooner or later, you got to come up with a new call. And that's not a call on him. That's just how much they're scoring right now. And it's exciting. I mean, there's, I've beat up on basketball a little bit over the year, right? But there is nothing better than playoff hockey. And this team is on fire. They're firing up at the right time. So I think the fact that you're coming into this game with all kinds of momentum, you want to be scoring in bunches. Hey, if there's a time to do it, it's right now.
Second straight year in the playoffs for the Erie Otters. They come home with a 2-0 series lead. Last year against Kitchener, it was 1-1. And the man who got a chance to call the next 3 games of that series by himself was Mr. Trevor Kubea, Otters communications coordinator, who's joining us live on the show here ahead of Game 3. Last year was exciting for you because it was your first playoffs. This year, I'm sure, more exciting because now you get to come home up 2-0. How have the first 2 games been like from a bird's eye view, watching this team just score goal after goal after goal after goal?
Oh, my goodness. It's been so much fun. And of course, you go into the series, and you're not really quite sure what to expect, obviously, right? Going into the playoffs, it's such a different animal from the regular season. And for the Erie Otters to come out and perform the way they did offensively, it was just a dream come true. I know if you go back and listen to Sean and I on the broadcast, I was pretty excited, of course, as a local kid. So anytime they were finding the back of the net, I was pretty buzzing up there in the broadcast booth at the Dow Event Center.
No, I can't blame you. I mean, it's amazing, right? And this team, they've scored in bunches all year, but I can't remember a game like this, at least game 1, where you're coming out in the second period and then you follow it up with game 3. Whatever happened in that suspension fight scuffle at the end of the season seemed to really fire this team up. And you guys know as much as I do, momentum plays a lot in playoffs, and I don't think you could ask for a better start.
You certainly can't. And of course, you mentioned the second period, and you mentioned that game on Thursday. First time the Otters have scored 8 goals in a period since 2018. It was in early September. It was opening night against the Flint Firebirds.
Who's on that roster?
Let's see, 2018, Garrett Podubny, I think, would have been the first star that night around that time period. But yeah, they won 12-1 over the Flint Firebirds on opening night. That was the last time they scored 8, and of course, setting a modern era record for goals in an OHL playoff period as well. So what a night that was, and what a way to kick off the series, and then really doing a heck of a job to build off of that momentum from the win on Thursday and bring that with them into Saturday.
We were talking before the broadcast began about, okay, you've scored 17 goals, you have the 8 in the second period, but there has been a differentiating goal scorer almost every single time the Otters put the puck in the net. Pano Femus is, of course, the leader. He's had and just earned OHL Player of the Week, if my memory serves me right. He's got the 8 points in the 2 games, but unlike last year, and I think this is really where you have to differentiate where Chris Millet's been able to take this team in the first 2 games. This is a 4-line team now. And you look back to last year, really the argument to be made with Erie in last year's playoffs, and you know this, Trevor, they were a 1-line team. They had 3 guys that could score. Everybody else was kind of, if you get lucky, maybe you put one in the back of the net. But that at least something for me as coming home back tonight in Game 3 is really the difference in this team. All 12 forwards can score.
And I think that you look at the statistics from last year's playoffs, back that up perfectly.
Yeah.
It was the Dylan Edwards, Pano Femus, Sam Alfano line that was really leading the way offensively for this group. And yes, it's been those guys again here, though, in the playoffs this year. But you mentioned a Callum Hughes stepping up, Malcolm Spence stepping up, and Martin Misiak with a hat trick. So you're getting different guys. Brett Hammond, I thought, has been so noticeable in this playoff run. Callum Hughes was hitting everything that moves, added a goal on Thursday night in game number 1. So you're getting different guys to contribute offensively, and I think that is huge for this Otters team. And on a Spirit side of things, yes, they were missing a couple guys that do return to the lineup tonight, mainly being Jacob Cloutier and Nick Sema, who is suspended. Those guys back in the lineup tonight. But you look at the depth of this Otters team compared to the depth of the Spirit team, I would certainly give Erie the edge in that category. And the Otters have really been able to utilize that to their advantage so far in the series.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, the depth is huge, especially come playoff time. The hits are harder, the skates are faster, and you're getting winded a lot quicker. So having that depth is huge. I think what's impressed me, even more than the goals and the offensive prowess and everything that's been going on, is the fact that there were 4 power play goals and 3 shorthanded goals in the last 2 games. So it's not even just the depth, it's the special teams, particularly the shorthanded goals. And I feel like I saw this happen a lot at the end of the year, where even if they were down a man, they were still being offensive. They were still trying to be aggressive, and they were scoring shorthanded goals, and that seems to have continued into the playoffs.
Yeah, 16 shorthanded goals for the Otters in the regular season. That was 4th in the OHL. They've already scored 3 in 2 games, which is unheard of in the postseason. Yeah. Again, you mentioned that in the playoffs, and Pano Femis said this earlier on this week in media availability, that in the playoffs, the checks get harder, everything gets tighter, the crowd gets louder, the officiating gets tighter, the game gets tighter, which we have not seen at all in this series. It's been very wide open hockey, and expecting that to continue here tonight. I thought one of the 2 games was going to be a little bit more playoff-like, and that certainly hasn't been the case, but my goodness, has it been entertaining to watch. But no, I agree that, the shorthanded goals and the penalty kill in particular has been big, and the power play operating at 50%, good enough for number 1 in the OHL playoffs right now. So when you're getting those special teams contributions, that is so big up and down the lineup, and again, just adding on for this team.
Here live at the Erie Insurance Arena here on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network, live before Game 3 tonight at 7 o'clock. The Otters trying to take a 3-0 series lead here at home this evening. Trevor Kubea joining us right now as you take a look at the series schedule. We talked about the offense, and when you look at these games, it is difficult to mention defense because there's just, quite frankly, not a lot. You've had 10 goals for Saginaw, of course, Erie with 17. But you mentioned before you came on the broadcast that it has to be noted, this Spirit team, they have a lot of offensive talent as well, including, of course, Michael Miso, who's going to be a top 10, top 5, maybe top 1 or 2 pick with Matthew Schaefer in the draft coming up. When you take a look at, though, the defense has been able, I think, at least to contain him, just 2 goals, 1 assist in the series, what has allowed this unit, without Matthew Schaefer, who's been hurt for a few months, to be able to contain the top guys for this Spirit team?
Well, it's been 2 guys that have done it. Ty Henry, Nathan Sauter have been out there. And pretty much every time that top line of Igor Chernyshov, Kristen Epperson, and Michael Misa have been on the ice for the Saginaw Spirit, and they have done just a phenomenal job. They match up really well. Nathan Sauter's got 4 points. He had a 3-point night on Saturday night at the Dow Event Center, but he's blocking shots, and Ty Henry providing that physical presence. It's been so awesome to see the way that those guys have stepped up defensively for this Otters team. And again, matching up so well against what is one of, if not the top and best line in the Ontario Hockey League. I think a trio in London might argue that case a little bit with Easton Cowan, Denver Barkey, and whoever you want to put on the side with those guys. But no, I mean, it's been just so much fun to watch the way that Erie has calmed down that top line. And again, I think it goes back to depth, that if you're taking away those top guys, who's going to hurt you? And for the Otters, Liam Storch has been the guy that has really been good. Had sat down with him earlier on today and talked to him a little bit about his success so far in the playoffs. He said, I'm just trying to go out, fill my role, and luckily the pucks have been going in the net for me, but that's not the guy you're expecting for the Saginaw Spirit to be their leading scorer going into the game tonight.
Yeah, and I think that helps too. I mean, I love the note on Ty Henry. He's +5 in the series so far, and I think that's huge. I think plus-minus is such an underrated stat in hockey, and I think when you have a defenseman who's not only keeping pucks out of the net or out of the defensive zone, but he's able to turn that around and generate offense on the front side too. I want to ask you this. You kind of mentioned this earlier. How does Erie's maybe that physical and aggressive forechecking style, how does that really maybe complement that depth? They maybe don't have that top goal scorer and they're missing a couple guys, their top 2 guys. So how does this kind of that physicality, aggressive forechecking really kind of play to their advantage.
It's huge. And again, I think it all goes back to Chris Millette and playing in the identity of their head coach, because there are, finishing checks. And I think we saw that in the first period on Thursday in particular, where they came out and they were hitting everything that moves, just trying to set that physical tone, which is so big, especially in a playoff series and a Saginaw team that, maybe isn't used to getting hit around a little bit. I mean, you talk to a guy like Garrett Fraser, who is an absolute wrecking ball and just one of my favorite players to watch play because of his style, that it adds so much to the game. And here's a guy who played in the Null, where he told me that, you go retrieve a puck in the corner in the Null, it's going to hurt. So he tries to bring that style to the OHL a little bit. And I think that does really complement this offensive unit, and seeing a guy like Pano Femus not be afraid to throw out a check, and Malcolm Spence was getting into it a little bit with Zane Parekh really in the entire game on Saturday night, and seeing him not backing down from anything. I think that really adds a lot, especially for some of the younger guys, seeing that, my leaders, they're willing to go out there and throw the body around, take a hit. Wesley Royston dropping the gloves with Josh Glavin on Saturday night. So it's been nice to see the physicality and, again, just kind of playing in the identity of their head coach.
Yeah, another astute point, too. Last year, it was Erie who got banged around by Kitchener, clearly the bigger team, and you're seeing that again between that special teams goal scoring. Now, all of a sudden, you're starting to see the things that didn't work for Erie last year, which led to those 3 OT losses and a 6-game series loss, turning on its head through 120 minutes of play. Couple minutes left with you, Trevor. Before we go, I think this transitions perfectly into what you just mentioned. Chris Millette, since he came here, there were some growing pains. They had a bit of a tough start with him, and since then it seems like they have that identity. What has Chris Millette brought to this team that is different from what we saw in the early part of the season that's maybe let them be more consistent than what they were?
I think just kind of the mentality that he's brought within this group. He said, look, I'm coming in with 17 games left in the season. I'm not going to change a lot systematically, but what I am going to do is I'm going to really bring a message and bring a little bit of fire behind the bench. And you talk to Chris, he's as mild-mannered as it gets, but you watch him on the bench, he's constantly talking to guys. And he said, look, the message is going to be fiery, but take the message, don't take the tone that it's delivered in. And I think that goes a long way with these guys, and I think it's so important for these guys to take that in, and he's just been so fantastic in really bringing culture here as well. One of the things that he mentioned, one of the first things that he said when he was appointed here is, if these guys walk by my door and don't say hello to me, I'm going to get angry at them. I just want to build that relationship with these guys, and I think that's so important to bring a guy like that into this organization, and a guy who obviously has won a lot in his career with the Kelowna Rockets. And I think we're, as you mentioned, there were some growing pains in the first part of this tenure, but I think we are finally starting to see, as we get to this postseason, what the Chris Millette Erie Otters are going to be. And I think the first 2 games have been a bit of an indicator, especially offensively. I think we're going to see them tighten up a little bit more defensively at some point in this series. But again, the way that the Saginaw team plays, and you'll see it tonight, they're so front foot, they're trying to outscore you. The Otters have beat them at their own game so far in this series. And you almost have to spot them 4 or 5 goals because of that offensive firepower that they provide. Noah Erlinden's been good in the series. The numbers won't tell you that story, unfortunately, but he has really made a couple of big saves for the Otters, kept them in a couple of games, and I think is another player that kind of goes into the shutting down some of the top guys in this Spirit lineup narrative.
Many people who are watching this podcast are longtime Otters fans and know that mild-mannered coaches named Chris tend to fare pretty well.
From the Western League.
From the Western League, tend to fare pretty well for the Otters in the postseason. Trevor, you showed us up when it came to the fashion, and you do a great job at everything you do, man. Enjoy the call tonight. Thanks again for being with us here on this Tuesday.
Isaac, Nick, thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate the time, and I'll always look forward to talking Otters hockey and spending time with you guys.
All right, we're going to let Trevor catch his breath because he has maybe 6 or 7 more goal calls to talk about tonight when the Otters take on the Spirit here in game number 3. Again, here is the series schedule. Game 3 tonight at 7 o'clock. Game 4 coming up Thursday at the Erie Insurance Arena. The Otters would like to hope that it ends up in a series sweep if they win tonight, and, of course, have a chance coming up in a couple of days from now. If necessary, Game 5 Saturday in Saginaw. Game 6 coming up Monday back in Erie if necessary. And Game 7 would be in Saginaw Tuesday, but we're not really going to think about that much, Nick Artman. And it was interesting as Trevor was talking. last year in the postseason, this team thought it was ready, right? First time they'd been to the playoffs since they won the championship in 2017. A lot of the players on this team were the same players that were on the team last year. But when you look at the way that this team has been able to improve, every single question mark that they had last year, the special teams, the depth of scoring, the physicality, seemingly has been answered. And you don't want to get too ahead of yourself. You're only 2 games in. But I'll tell you what, 2 wins on the road to start the series and correcting those errors, they're in a really good spot.
Absolutely. I mean, your overreaction is not going to come true. Go back to the Monday show if you don't know what I'm talking about. But it needs to. I mean, you're 100% correct. I mean, there was so much hype and expectation for the playoffs last year, and I think it was because just Erie was excited. We were excited about playoff hockey. So I think you reset, and I think having that team that has playoff experience is huge because they know what to expect. They might be able to settle down a little bit, and just like Trevor said, the team seems to be bought in to what Chris Millette is selling, and that can be a dangerous combination. I don't expect the scoring to stay this high, but man, how important is that momentum or that psychological advantage that they have over Saginaw right
How
now?
many times have we seen first couple of games in a series very high scoring? You get to game 3, you switch venues, you switch strategy because you don't want to give up all these odd man rushes, and it's a 1-0 game. So don't be surprised if we come out tonight. Obviously, my prediction is not that, but if we get out and we have a 1-0 game eventually coming up tonight. One way or another, the Otters just hope that they end up on the right side of this, regardless of whatever happens. And we're excited to be here again here on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. Of course, always brought to you by our friends at Rebich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info on Rebich Investments, head to the website, www.rebichinvestments.com. And their phone number is 814-734-3433. Don't call them now, though, because I saw Todd Rebich just a few moments ago walking amongst the crowd. They also sponsor the Otters playoffs, so they're a busy group of people here tonight. You know who else is busy? This guy, Mr. Tim Quinn. We've now had 2 guests on, Nick, and both of them have completely shown us up in the dress game. You got bow tie and what's that, orange and gold tie, Tim?
Listen, I got a 20-inch neck. I am not. That's a lot of time, my friend. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's great to see you and great to be here.
So you've been in Erie the last few years studying at Mercyhurst. This is your first season with the team, and it's playoff hockey. What do you expect tonight to be like for somebody who's going to be inside the glass and potentially in the crowd and in the stands and wherever the fans are going to be tonight?
Oh man, just so much excitement, and that's something, it's a word that I've used so much this season, and it's really described my entire season with the Otters. I like to say to my parents that I feel like I was a trade deadline acquisition on the broadcast group, that I've come in and played this last half of the season, and it just had so much fun. It's been so exciting. Every day you come into work and you don't know what team you're going to see out on the ice, and it could be a team that goes and scores 9 goals, or it could be on the other side of the 8 ball there. But just so much excitement coming into playoffs. For me, it's my first playoffs working. I was here last year for the Kitchener games. Saw a couple of really, really good hockey games and a really great Kitchener team that was able to win and move on in the series. And that's kind of what I wanted to see going into this series, was who's going to be that team that jumps out and really takes the momentum. You guys were just talking about how important the momentum is in playoffs, right? It's everything. So, and when you go on the road, you're hoping to win one of those games. If you split the road series, you consider it a win for yourself and your club, right? For the Otters to go on the road, and this is a team of villains, is what they've proven to me. It's a team of villains. They go out there, they love getting booed. They're smiling to the fans when they score 8 or 9 goals in the game. Now I feel like it's going to empower them even better to come back home in front of a crowd that loves them, and they can still be the villains to the Saginaw team, but they're going to be those justified villains, those villains that are just with the crowd behind them. They've got the fans going, and a crowd that's going to love to see them back out on the ice. So much excitement, and I'm ready to watch some playoff hockey.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that, because, of course, we all know the rival that Erie loves to have in this building is London, and who knows, if things go the way that they're going, that may be what happens in round number 2. We'll have to see. But something has to be said about the American rivalry. You've got 3 American teams in the OHL, so playoff series aren't very likely, and yet you have 2 teams separated by 4.5 hours, Tim. You have to take some of that into account, I'm sure, here tonight.
Absolutely. That's why, every broadcast, it's, hey, setting up the All-American rivalry. It's real. It's a real thing, right? You're fighting for that little bit of pride. You're not facing the team that has to go all the way from Ontario, all the way from Kitchener. You're facing that team, even though it is 4.5 hours, it's a U.S. team. And so you're fighting with that little bit of national pride. And, the Otters have guys like Kerry Terrance, who's played on the U.S. national team and won gold medals multiple times with them. And although he's not in the lineup, you better know he's taken that leadership into the locker room and saying, hey, guys, we're not only, playing for the name on the front right now, we're playing for the soil. We're playing for the country. This is a U.S. rival. We got to prove we're the best team in this country, because Kerry Terrance has been on teams that they've been the best team not only in the country but in the entire world.
Yeah.
So he's going to say, hey, we gotta have the U.S. ownership here. We got to go out there and take on this role and go knock off Saginaw.
I love how you call them the team of villains, and I'm gonna run that into the ground. I'm gonna make that stick, because I think I think that is a great way to put this, because the team is, I don't want to call them a bunch of underdogs because that puts a negative connotation to it, but you're out your top 2 players. They had an up and down season. They changed their coach in the middle of the season, and usually a coaching change doesn't work out. But like we were just talking about with Trevor, Chris Millette has brought that physicality style, and maybe there is that little bit of villainy to them. And I think what is really going to work out with that narrative is Erie. Yeah. Erie loves that, little brother mentality. We will beat up our team, but the minute you come to our house, we are protecting them, right? So I think if you take that villain approach, you have that physicality that Millette has brought to this team, you're going to have that first hit in this arena tonight, and this place is going to go nuts.
Oh, it always does.
Yeah.
It always does. The place loves the physicality. And I always like to stand between the benches whenever there is a fight on the ice, because the guys go walking by me, and I turn around. I watch them walk out. Everybody has swarmed to the gate. Yeah. Everybody's trying to get them to give high fives. These are kids that have just gotten into a fist fight, right? So they don't know really how to handle those emotions all the time. Yeah. But they walk off like Captain America silhouetted in the distance. It is some of the most beautiful
superhero
stuff.
Landing.
Yeah, it's some of the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen. The way that this crowd in this city gets behind the players who put themselves in line. And I think that's why Alex Messier has become a real fan favorite. And it's not because he's putting 80 points on the board. It's because he will stand up for his team. He's a physical guy. He's going to stand up for the crowd. He's going to stand up for his goalies. That's what Erie loves to see.
Absolutely.
That's what this team loves. And since Chris Millette has come in, the team's just really bought into the mentality. They followed his leadership, and it really showed. It has been so cool to watch on the bench, his verbal leadership, the way he's able to communicate with the players in between shifts, show them on the iPad, hey, here's what you did wrong. We can't have this. We got to do better on this going forward. It's been really, really interesting to see, because I see so many different coaches roll through with different coaching styles. Some of them will stay silent the majority of the period. Some of them very loud, scream at you, try to go the hard way. Some of them are going to try to lift you up. Millette's kind of a mixed bag with all of it. Yeah. And I think it's such a unique way of leading the team. And I think it's morphed so well with this Otters group.
Listen, you got to be careful in between the gaps, because after that bench clearing game, we started like a Where's Tim Quinn campaign, because we couldn't find you. We lost you, and we wanted to make sure you were
underneath the crowd.
We thought you were in the fray or something like that.
Yeah, no, if I was in that game, you would have seen my face smushed up against the glass. It would have been the most embarrassing moment of my career. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though, you touched on it just a second ago, but I wanted to ask you about Chris Millette, because you're the one guy who gets to wear a microphone and be right there next to the bench. Do you sense a different energy with the team since he came in? Because we talked with Trevor. There was a little growing pain in the first few games, and then the offense started to find their wheels. Yep. Besides the extra bark, what else does he bring in an in-game experience that just differs from what happened earlier in the season?
That's a great question. I kind of came in at a time where it was the start of that transition, and where Wes Wolf was kind of the acting head coach for a little bit. So to see his coaching style was very interesting, and I think Wes is one of those guys that will be a head coach in this league for a very long time. I have so much respect for him and what he's been able to do in his leadership style. But for Chris Millette, it is very vocal, and I think that's something this team really responds to. And especially when you're out the number 1 draft pick, you're out your captain. You need somebody that steps up and is that vocal leader. And they've had that with Pano Femis in the past, where he's been the guy to kind of step up and be vocal, the top line center. An incredible job, obviously, coming off of one of the best games that you can possibly have in hockey, right? But I think Chris comes in, and he just leads with his vocal mentality, and is telling these guys and just consistently giving them the constructive criticism that they need to get better, not only the next period or the next day, the next shift they go out there. They want to do a better job for them. So it's been so cool to kind of just see him interact with everybody, offense, defense, goalies, just to keep everybody on their toes, keep them ready to go. And then, of course, his crowd loves him. After you mentioned that little bench clear, that little incident there, he was shown on the video board the next couple of games. it was the biggest pop of the night. And so, he's not only won the respect of the locker room so quickly, which I think is the biggest thing when becoming a head coach.
Yes.
You got to win the respect of the guys in the room, right?
And
you have
that
to win the
takes
respect.
time.
It usually takes a ton of time. He has done it in a tremendous amount of time. He's just been a great look for the organization. I'm excited to be able to work with him, hopefully, into the future. He's somebody that I respect so much and has been nothing but the absolute best to me between the benches. Anytime I need to interview him, gives me a second. He'll fist bump me before the period starts. So the way he leads, the way he treats the players has just been a treat.
No, I love that. I mean, it's you're hyping me up, right? And I think I think that's so important, and I think that speaks a lot to Millett and what he brings to the team, because you make that coaching change. Typically, that's a bad thing, but the growing pains, the physicality. I think that speaks volumes of who he is as a coach, as a person, how much this team buys into him. That's a recipe for some dangerous success as we move into the playoffs.
I think Nick just wants to be a part of this villain group.
I'm making t-shirts.
Everybody wants to. That's the thing. I'm trying to get it across to everybody on the broadcast and on social media. I'm like, hey, this is a group that you'll notice if we and hopefully when we get to round 2, these guys love to play the villain. So let's get behind him now, because the stock's down here, but it's going to be going up.
Do they have a specific villain that they admire? I'm curious.
Oh, on their bench?
Sure.
I mean, you got the return Alex Messier in the series. This is his first time here since that infamous incident, so I'm sure the crowd is going to love to see him back out there. He's a good pest. I've also really appreciated Quinn McCall defensively recently. He's somebody that is just consistently around the play. After the whistle, you'll see him always protecting his goalie, which is one of the biggest things that you can do in hockey. You always take care of your goalie, right? And whenever a team has these star players, and back in the day, your Gretzky's and Lemieux, right? You're going to look at them and be like, hey, he needs an enforcer. He needs somebody to take care of him out there. And the defensive core does it so well, not only with Messier, but also with guys like Quinn McCall, and even Malcolm Spence will step in there and get aggressive at times. So, I think Spence is one of those villains that he'll score a goal. Marty Mishiak is out there right on the forward side. They'll score a goal,
Dylan
and Marty
Edwards,
Mishiak goes one of these, and all of a sudden he's smiling into the crowd like he's speaking in front of 80,000, right? He's looking around and enjoying and taking it all in. So those guys are certainly something.
I love it.
Man, the personality is, it's funny because hockey players are notorious for saying nothing in media and in the public. They got personalities. This guy can tell you, we can tell you too. For you, Tim, and, the bench incident be damned, whatever.
Sure.
You got a chance to be around Connor McDavid, things like that, great stuff throughout the season. Do you have a favorite moment between the bench, something that just sticks out to you besides the glass getting knocked over on your face?
Besides your life flashing before your eyes.
Right. Oh, man. There's been so many really fun ones. And I think for me, it harkens back to maybe one of those fights. And Spence is one of those guys that isn't necessarily expected to be a fighter, right? This guy's going early first round NHL draft. Fingers crossed, Pittsburgh Penguins love it.
They hate him.
He's one of those guys that is a leader on the ice, right? And he will lead by example. And when he gets into it, he had a really nice fight a couple of weeks. I can't remember exactly what game it was. Had a really nice fight and goes skating off. And it's just one of those moments, like I mentioned, right, where he's silhouetted almost, and this crowd is behind him. And if I could capture the moment between the benches, I would have loved to, because the crowd was on fire. I've never heard anything like it for Spence, and to see him walk off a hero's journey back to the locker room. One of those moments has got to be just so, it sticks with you, it burns in your mind. I can picture 17 walking away with all of the hands down, trying to get a high five after a big fight. So there's nothing like the eruption of a crowd whenever that happens.
I love it. I want to see them fully lean into this villain mentality and pull like a Four Nations as soon as the puck drops here for the first period.
Oh, yeah.
Just fire the crowd up. Let's go.
How about Wesley Royston last game, right? Getting into it early in the first.
Well, we're about, 15 minutes away from the lineups getting posted. If you hear the fourth line starting for Erie, then Chris Mullins, I think, going to do this on purpose.
What happened.
So obviously we're hoping for a win tonight, Tim.
Yes.
But we were talking with Trevor and even Nick and I just a few moments ago. How many times in a series, NHL, OHL, NAHL, QMJHL, whatever it be, you get high scoring games in the first couple, and you switch locations and you start grinding, and all of a sudden you got 1-0, 2-1 games. How do you envision this game? Assuming we want Erie to win, how do you see this game going tonight?
Yeah, well, I think you guys said it before I came on. You don't necessarily expect that offensive production to continue the entire series, right? There's going to be a game where two great goalies have their way. And Noah Erliden is certainly one of those guys that out of nowhere can seemingly provide either a shutout or a 2-1 kind of a game. And so maybe, and as you mentioned, changing locations is kind of that time where you see the shift in the series. And so maybe we see something like that tonight where it's not 9-5, 14-12, some crazy looks like NFL scoring. So maybe tonight, like you guys said, it could be a defensive battle. But these are two offensive groups, and especially with Saginaw, that's how they win these games. They hound you offensively. They tire out your defense. They wear you down until later in the game, and then they get guys like Michael Misa to go in there and just cakewalk through and find the back of the net. So I think as much as it might be maybe a shift in the series and in less offense, I think Erie certainly needs to keep that offensive production up, because you can't start sleeping on this Saginaw team. You're up 8-2. They score 3 in the third. This is a team that doesn't go away. Right? They play a full 60 minutes, whether they allow a record-breaking 8 goals in the second period or not. So the offensive production seriously and surely needs to be there throughout this series for the Otters. So I think you're going to need guys maybe like a Dylan Edwards to step up, a passionate player. Marty Mishiak has been unbelievable in the playoffs. He's somebody that reminds me a lot of maybe a young Evgeny Malkin, right? Where he goes out there and has a couple of okay shifts, and then one random shift, he turns it on and is like, wait, how did puck on the string, magnet seal, then pick a corner, right? So he's one of those guys. Maybe those two are maybe my picks for maybe first goal and the leaders of this game.
Okay, I'm all in. Tim's got the predictions and everything down to go as well. We hope the glass doesn't shatter on him.
I hope so. Yeah, I just got a nice haircut the other day. I'd rather not the rest of it be cut off by the glass.
You got the playoff beard going
on, too. That's right. Maybe I let it go.
You two in particular.
I didn't bring the tie, but I got the playoff beard.
It's a good look.
I can't grow one. But, hey, man, great stuff as always.
Good to see you.
It's always great to see you.
That's right.
Continued success both in this playoff run and hopefully seasons to come as well.
Thank you so much. You guys are the best.
All right, Tim Quinn going to be inside the glass joining us right now on the show as he gets ready for his perch. And I'm jealous, Nick. I mean, he gets probably the best place in all of the OHL, in my opinion, being inside the glass for these games. As we bring it back in here, just the two of us for the remainder of the show. I'm pumped. I think you get back in here for playoff hockey. You're up 2-0 in a series. I think, though, this team has more confidence this time around coming back home than they did against Kitchener. And this team was pretty confident going into the Kitchener series in Game 3, tied 1-1. But there's just a different feel to this game tonight, it feels.
No, I agree. I think what it comes down to is kind of what we talked about earlier, and that's the experience of the team, right? That's the fact that maybe when they made the playoffs last year, it's not that it was surprising, but it was just inexperience. So they came out hot. They had a little bit of a rough game last year, but now I think you have a much more seasoned, maybe isn't the word, because they're still,
they're still kids. they're still most of them in high school,
exactly.
Which is crazy.
Right, but it's still you that experience, and any athlete will tell you the experience of doing it once really kind of helps them set that tone or maybe take some of those butterflies out. And I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a confident Erie team that you didn't really see last year, and that togetherness. I think it's a perfect storm, right? Of experience, of Chris Millette, of just that momentum that they're carrying into the playoffs. And it's coming home for this game being up 2-0. I can't understate how huge or overstate how huge that is.
Well, I'll tell you what, we talked about will it be a defensive game? Who knows? But I think for Erie, one of the keys tonight, you got to come out and you got to score early.
Right.
The expectation is that Saginaw is going to score their goals. And that's why, as much as I understand you want your defense to be more complete than games 1 and 2, the Spirit are going to score their goals regardless.
Right.
They're going to probably put 3-4 up on the board tonight. So the big question now becomes for Erie is, can you get enough goals early? Can you get the momentum? Trevor was talking about how they stayed in the game in the first period in Game 1, but they were outshot 14-6. Saginaw, for the most part, has controlled the opening few minutes in these series. I would love to see if Erie, first 5 minutes before the first media timeout, can you come out and tilt the ice in your favor with the crowd behind you, with the 2-0 series lead, and really, for lack of a better word, put the foot down and say, we're just heading to a 3-0 series lead, and there's nothing you can do about it.
No, and that's what they're going to have to do, right? And, I mean, we've talked a lot of good. But if I can be honest with you for a second, Trevor's gone, Tim's gone. Let me be real with you here for a second.
Sure,
I'm a little nervous because that level of offense in a playoff environment is rare. It's hard to keep that up. Like you said, there would be no surprise if this game is 1-0.
Right.
My biggest concern in this game is the defense or the goaltending even, right? I mean, I'm not piling on Erliden because, like Trevor said, he played a great game. He saw a lot of shots in those 2 games. 10 goals in 2 games, that's a lot. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have to try and count on your scoring prowess to keep up, or we're going to need to see Erliden, I think, step up a little bit? And again, I'm not pounding on the kid because I think it's a whole defensive strategy. They're playing very aggressive on offense, and that's great.
Yeah.
But to get through this series, let alone make it to the rest of the way through the playoffs, we need to see this defense tighten up a little bit.
Well, the expectation for Saginaw is that they're going to come out and play their best 5 minutes of hockey at the start
100%.
of the game. You're down 2-0. You lose tonight, this series is over. I mean, we've seen 3-0 comebacks before in the OHL, but you're not going to win, in my view, 4 straight games,
Nope.
2 on the road, so you have to win tonight.
Yeah.
So you would like to think the Spirit team's going to come out and be aggressive. If I'm Noah Erliden, I'm going to match that. This is a goaltender that Ryan Zapolsky, the goaltending coach, also an analyst for us at the podcast network, guy who likes to stay in his net, likes to let the puck come to him. Change that early in the game tonight. Be aggressive. Come out to the top of the blue paint. If there's a 2-on-1, make the guy shoot the puck.
Yeah.
Cut the angle off.
Show him something different.
Exactly. And early in the game, if the Otters give up 10 shots, but Noah's 10 for 10, and you take Saginaw's best punch early, how many times have we seen teams in desperation have a great start to the game, but if you don't have a lead, then you get in trouble because you've just thrown your knockout blow and it hasn't landed.
And you're trying to force it then, right? You're trying to play a game that you can't keep up with. You know, it's tough when you're down by that. And I don't care if you're at home. Being at home is maybe, like I said, the best place for that because you have this team. If the team is down 2-0 at the end of the first period, I think the crowd can juice them back up. Right. And if we can see some of that camaraderie and we can see some of that villainry come out, then I think it'll actually work out in their favor. So, you know, I think that's going to be my key to the game tonight is can that Erie defense and goaltending change that pace? Do they need to change up that look? They need to show Saginaw something different because now Saginaw has seen this for 2 games. So you know on the bus ride over here or whatever, however they got here, that they've planned, okay, how do we take advantage of this? We know maybe we've had some success on Erliden in the last 2 games. How can we take this and then, play some defense and slow down that Erie offense? So Erie's going to have to do the same. They're going to have to adjust.
For me, there's one magic number in this game that's obvious, and that's 6. Erie has won 3 straight home games when they've scored. The last 3 home wins, I should say, for the Otters, they have scored 6 goals or more in all 3 of those games. And so if you're Erie tonight, the understanding has to be we gave up 5 in the first 2 games. If we can put up 6 goals, in theory, we should be able to win the game. But, you know, it's fascinating. We heard Trevor talk about Chris Millette and how he came in and he said to the media, I don't want to change up a lot of things.
Yeah.
But yet he has been able to change the tenor of this team without going out and blatantly saying, you know, and it's to me, it's fascinating because typically physical hockey teams aren't capable of scoring goals.
Right.
But he has somehow been able to ingratiate that hybrid role where you can play physical on the wall and yet still have a guy coming up the middle of the ice to be aggressive. And that is very rare for a head coach to be able to do for a young hockey team. Because as a young guy, as a high schooler, you're either one of those fancy guys who wants to score or you want to crush everybody. Right. Normally, you don't get both.
No, and maybe that's what Millette saw in this team as their weakness. Maybe he saw them saying, hey, okay, we know we got to pick up this offense. We know we can play offense. Maybe our defense and our goaltending need a little bit of help. So how do you counteract that? How do you slow down the other team's offense? You beat the crap out of them, you know, to put it bluntly. You know, so that physicality, that aggressive defense, the forecheck, even like, and you see that the shorthanded goals when you're on the penalty kill. Yeah. They're not just sitting back and playing a conservative 4-diamond defense. They are really, they're pushing it. If they get the puck, they're going to hit Sam Alfano coming up the right wing or whatever it might be. They're going to play that game, that aggressiveness the whole time. And it's working. I can't knock it. Can they keep it up? We'll see.
Well, I think one of the things that Chris Millette's really identified with this Saginaw team is when you're a fancy team that likes to score goals, you are prone to turning the puck over, right? Because you're constantly pushing it. And as Trevor and Tim mentioned, you're constantly on your toes. I think last year, the difference that we saw with this Kitchener team, they were very fundamentally sound. Yeah. They'd lose the puck, they'd turn it over, but you immediately have 2 or 3 guys back. I don't think Erie had a single odd man rush that that worked to their advantage in the series last year against the Kitchener Rangers. This year, different. You can take advantage of things like turnovers in the neutral zone, turnovers at the blue line, even when they turn the puck over on the power play with Saginaw. And I think that's where Chris Millet's really done a good job with this team is you play against a squad that's so aggressive. At some point, they're going to make mistakes. And Erie, every time that Saginaw has made a mistake, they have capitalized off of it.
They're playing smart.
Yeah.
Right? They're playing fast. They're scoring in bunches, and they're playing aggressive. But it's not, to your point, it's not, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. It's not like they're just playing rough. They're not playing
not a
backyard.
character.
It's strategic in how they're doing it, right? They're not just throwing their weight around to throw their weight around. They're not just bash brothering to bash brother, but it's strategic in how they're doing it. I'm not saying they plan every hit or they plan every fight, but I think it is planned in a sense of, hey, we know we have this maybe a little bit of a weakness here. How can we turn that weakness into a strength? Yeah. And I think that's what a good coach will do in any situation. So I think that's what you're seeing is it's just part of their game plan right now, that physical offensive style.
Some other interesting stats as we've been showing you this graphic throughout the entirety of the show. 17 goals for the Otters, of course, most by any team in the OHL through 2 playoff games. And remember, they're in the Western Conference with Windsor, with Kitchener, and with London, who have all completely dominated in the top 3 seeds in their series and in their season so far. Players to watch out for. Nick mentioned a couple. Pano, Femus, Martin Miziak, the leading goal scorers for the Otters. Pano's been on a tear. He was named the OHL Player of the Week this past week with 8 points in 2 games. Miziak's added 4 goals. I like the Malkin reference, too, for Tim Quinn.
I do too. That's a good
we don't have
comparison.
Malcolm Spence on here, too. But, yeah, I really hope the Penguins get him because, God, they need a bunch. But we'll save that conversation for another day. I really love the 3 straight home wins with 6 goals or more. And, again, we preface all of this with saying their 2 best players, arguably, or at least their 2 most noticeable players, Matthew Schaefer and Kerry Terrance, are skating. They have not played. Sure. That, to me, is what makes this even more impressive.
Yeah, they're able to stand up. I mean, obviously, you would love to see them both back. Schaefer's the projected number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, continuing to heal from that broken collarbone. During the World Juniors, I think, when playing for Team Canada, right?
Early in the World Juniors.
And then Kerry Terrance, who was drafted by the Anaheim Ducks last year, he hasn't played since, unfortunately, they took him out on the stretcher in that game at Owen Sound. So, yeah, these are your 2 biggest guys. And I don't want to say you don't miss them because you do, but you're right. That's what makes it all the more impressive. Yeah. And I think, I don't remember if it was Trevor or Tim, but I think that's where that depth becomes so important. You listed a couple guys right there on that graphic, but, I mean, we have guys like Ty Henry that Trevor was talking about. We didn't talk about Dylan Edwards. Dylan Edwards had a goal and an assist in the first game, and then 2 goals and 2 assists in the second game. And that doesn't even make the highlight list because of how good everybody else is playing.
And Dylan Edwards was one of 3 players who could score goals in the playoffs last year.
Exactly. So I'm excited. I think there's a lot of potential here. Like I said, I'm worried about the defense, but, man, they seem to be putting it together at the right time. And like we said at the top of the show, momentum is huge in playoff hockey, and Erie has all the momentum going into this game.
Here are the projected lines for the Otters as we get ready for game number 3. Spence, Femus, Alfano, the top line. Dylan Edwards, Gabe Fraska, and Martin Miziak, the second line. Ty Challenger, Callum Hughes, and Wesley Royston make up the third line. Alex Messier, Edwards, and Hammond are line number 4. You have Henry and Sauter, the lockdown defensive pair, as Trevor we're talking about, against Michael Misa. Ambrosio and Quinn McCall on the second pairing. Alexi Davio and Fraser are your third defense pairings, and, of course, Noah Erliden in net. But you look at that lineup, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, they've got depth, and now you trust that all 4 lines can score. We mentioned at least 1 player on every line, including a guy like Messier on the 4th line who can score, and that, for me, tonight is got to continue to be a key. Your top 2 lines may not have as much production. They probably won't have as much production as game 1 and 2. Can the 3rd and 4th lines buy a couple of goals tonight?
Absolutely. Or at least be able to keep pace, right? Yeah. To keep Saginaw from scoring so that you can continue to play that top 2-line offense. They're, like I said, without Terrance, without Schaefer, you're kind of missing, I don't want to downplay Miziak and Femus and Spence. They've been playing great, but you're kind of missing some stars. Yeah. But you're able to see, like, Messi. I think that's a great player to watch tonight because not only can they come up and they can score and be on the forecheck, but he's going to throw his body around too. So, and you know what? I like to see that they went with Erliden tonight. I wondered if they would maybe change it up just because of the change to maybe keep Saginaw guessing. I love that they're sticking with their guy. He had a couple down games, but he's had a great season overall. And I'm glad they're sticking with him in this lineup as well.
Big thing for me, too, tonight. Keep in mind, you get home ice advantage now in Game 3, so Chris Millette gets last change.
Yeah.
So you're going to get to see Ty Henry and Nate Sauter against the Michael Misa line anytime that there's a whistle and a stoppage in play. Advantage Erie there as well, because you now get a chance to have your lockdown defensive pairing. So if you're Saginaw, you want as few whistles as possible tonight. And if you're Erie, you're okay with offsides. You're okay with stoppages in play, pucks out of play. You're okay with fights. You're okay with any of that because you can match up well if you're Chris Millette. All right, Nick, who wins tonight and what's the score?
Oh, my gosh. You know what? My heart says Erie. My gut says Saginaw. And I hate that because I think everything we've talked about I'm so excited about. But I think that Saginaw is going to make those adjustments. They're going to want to win this game more just because they're coming on. They were embarrassed in game 1 and game 2. They're going to want to come and do the same thing. So I think they're coming in with a little more edge. They're getting some star power back. I edge this one 2-1 Saginaw.
I think you're partially right. I actually think you're going to see Saginaw up 2-0 early in this game. It would not shock me if the Spirit come out, they score the first couple of goals, they quiet the crowd. The concern I have on the Spirit side, which is the advantage for Erie, Saginaw has not been able to have that sort of depth. And I think once you start getting into the grind of the game, you start the physical play as Erie's been able to have the advantage of, and you start matching up better with the top line, including Misa. I think Erie's going to start to chip away. I think this is going to be a game. It's not going to be a pretty game for the fans. They're going to be down most of the game. I think Erie
Bluebirds are going to be out.
I think Erie actually comes back, and I'm going to go with the reverse jinx from last year. I think they win this game in overtime.
I love it.
This team so badly needs a playoff overtime win to be able to erase the Demons. Remember, they lost game 3 in overtime here after being up multiple goals. They lost game 6 in overtime here. They lost game 5 in overtime in Kitchener last year. This team's playoff demons have been, lack of a better word, here at home. They're 1-2 in the playoffs at home with the majority of this unit since that run from last year. So I think Erie's going to win this game 3-2 in overtime, but it's going to take a while for them to get their legs going. And I think, Nick, that's okay because, again, like we said, this is going to be the knockout punch that Saginaw is going to try to have. Their best hockey, you would like to hope, unless they're just dead as a doormat at this point, first 10 minutes of this game tonight.
No, and they know they need that. They know that, right? If we know that, they know that.
Yeah, it's clear.
So they're going to want to come out hot. They're going to want to come out fast, and they're going to want to score in bunches. So they want to quiet this crowd as fast as possible because the EIA, it doesn't matter if there's 1,000 people, 3,000 people, or 10,000 people.
A lot of building.
It is a lot of building, but this place gets loud for everything. For a face-off win, for an elbow, for a penalty, for a goal, whatever happens, this place goes nuts. If it's pro Erie, it's cheering everywhere.
Yeah.
As soon as the Saginaw defense gets up by 2 goals, the Bluebirds are going to come out, not against Erie, but to defend their team.
Yep.
This place is energetic, loud, and engaged as honestly as much as any hockey arena I've ever been to.
Certainly Arizona, that's for sure, if not others as well, and maybe Pittsburgh this year with the way the Penguins have been playing. All right, one more time. Here is the series schedule. We've got Game 3 tonight in about 12 minutes from now. Game 4 will be played. That's Thursday, 7 o'clock. Hopefully the Otters are going for a sweep by that point. And then you see Game 5, 6, and 7, all if necessary, one of which on Monday night would be back here at the Erie Insurance Arena. So still a lot of series left to go. Still a lot of hockey needing to be played. But for the Otters, they're in a good spot, 17 goals through 2 games. And we'll see if they can add to that tonight and add a win, Nick.
Before we go, we're pushing puck time here. Let me ask you this. You kind of we talked about this pregame, and I want to make sure we hit this. How much of a series win does this mean for Erie?
I think it's huge. And I saw you listed on your notes, they're still living in the shadow of Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
The irony from that is this year, a lot of it was centered around the Connor McDavid jersey retirement, right? Where he comes back to Erie in January and you retire the number. And, I think last year, as we talked about, this team was excited to be here. Yeah. They thought they were ready. Yeah. They had a chance to 1-1 against Kitchener. They just weren't ready in the big moments. Yeah. I think this series win is important for 2 reasons. Number one, of course, because you haven't won a playoff series since you won the OHL championship. Yep. I think number 2 is because of the roller coaster ride of the season this team has had. Whether it be, the death of your owner, whether it be the coaching change, whether it be the McDavid jersey retirement. Right. This has been for so many of the organization people that are in it as admin people that are, the coaching staff, the training staff, and the players. It's been a wild season. It's taken years off of people's lives. And I think to be able to at least
off of my head.
Right. To at least be able to be rewarded with a playoff series win and show that there is tremendous progress being 100%. Made, I think is huge. And of course, for the community, again, we saw the last 2 years with the Seawolves winning the Eastern League Championship.
Yeah.
You pack buildings on weeknights in the middle of September when it is cold as hell out. This city gets up for their teams, even if it be for junior teams. And for the Otters, you win a playoff series. Maybe you get to play London next. I don't think there'd be any sweeter way to be able to end the year based on all the chaos that's happened.
No, I'm with you 110%. I'm glad you stole my notes because I think in a way the McDavid jersey retirement was also like a turning period for this team.
Yeah.
I think it was a way, ironically, because he was here and there was a big event. It was all about McDavid. But in a way, I think it really helped them get out from underneath that shadow. And now they've become their own team. They have new life. They're up 2-0, and I think they're ready to write their own story. May not happen tonight, like I said, but I still think they win the series.
They could get well on their way. They win tonight. It's 3-0, and at that point, you're looking at a second round. Well, we want to thank everyone at the Erie Otters, Sean Bednar, Trevor Kubea, Dave Brown, the general manager, for letting us be here. This is our second show here, and it gets more exciting every time.
It's so much fun.
It has been wonderful to get to be with you. We love being in the community with all of you. And as Gem City Sports Podcast Network grows, we hope you'll continue to be with us throughout this journey. Hopefully we're back here again coming up in round 2 or maybe coming up in game 6 if it gets that far. But, Nick, man, this has been so much fun. And what an hour we've gotten to spend here at the Erie Insurance Arena. And now the best part, get to turn our chairs around and watch
the game. That's, I love talking to you and I love talking to the guys and I love being here and talking to the people, but I'm excited to watch this game. That's for sure.
And we hope you are too. If you're not coming down tonight, make sure to come Thursday or maybe come a little bit later. It might be 3-2 though by the time that you get here. That's it for us, everybody. We see you back here later in the week on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network, brought to you by Rebs Investments. Take care. Enjoy the game.